Perhaps almost every girl at some point in her childhood dreamed of being a princess. But what we didn't understand back then was that real princesses didn't live in fairy tales. The reality was harsh. Women of royal blood were never meant to follow their hearts. But today, I want to tell you about 3 women who dared to do exactly that, and about the price they paid for choosing love. In January 1437, the Dowager, Queen of England and mother of King Henry VI, Catherine of Valois, died. And soon after her funeral, a secret she had carried throughout her entire life was revealed. A secret that shocked all of England and changed its history. It turned out that she had not only secretly married a man far beneath her status, a Welshman named Owen Tudor, but had also had 4 children with him. And if that surname Tudor sounds familiar to you, yes, that's no coincidence. This is the love story that laid the foundation for a dynasty. Catherine of Valois was a French princess who, as part of her duty and to seal a diplomatic alliance, was married at the age of just 18 to a king 15 years older than her, Henry V of England. Henry, quite clearly, loved war far more than his young wife. Almost immediately after her coronation, he left her to return to his military campaign, and for most of their very short marriage, they lived apart. Just a few months after Catherine gave birth to a son, whom they had somehow managed to conceive during their rare meetings, Henry V fell ill and died, never even seeing his own heir. Catherine was left a widow at just 21 years old, having been Queen of England for only 2 years. You've probably heard that, in the past, widowhood was not always the worst fate for a woman. In some ways, it could even bring a certain freedom from social pressure and a degree of independence. But that was not the case for Catherine. Parliament and the Royal Council watched her every move closely, and even passed a law stating that she could only remarry with the king's permission. And as you can imagine, the king at that time was still a child, which meant Catherine would have had to wait years until he came of age. And for a young woman in the prime of her life, that was a rather bleak prospect. But Catherine was not the kind of woman to quietly accept her fate. She decided to take her life and her love into her own hands and entered into a secret relationship with Owen Tudor. There are several legends about how they met. In one of them, he was drunk, stumbled during a dance and, quite literally, fell into her lap. Another tells that the Queen saw him bathing naked and was rather impressed by what she saw. But, most likely, the truth is much simpler. Owen was, by all accounts, a handsome man, constantly present around a young and lonely woman, serving in her household, and within the rather closed and isolated life of Windsor Castle. That was enough for a spark to appear. Even though Owen came from a respectable Welsh family, his status was still far too low for a woman who was both a princess by blood and a queen by rank, which meant their love could never be open. We don't even know for certain whether they were officially married, as no reliable records have survived. And, of course, it would not have been in the Tudors' interest for their dynasty to be seen as the result of an illegitimate relationship, rather than a lawful marriage. So, it is generally believed that some form of ceremony did take place, most likely in the early 1430s. But in the end, what matters most is the fact itself. The fact that this woman chose her own partner and married for love in the 15th century is truly something extraordinary. The Royal Council was shocked by what had happened. A queen was expected to embody humility and virtue, and instead she had married for love, and one by one, children began to be born. Edmund, Jasper, Edward, and a daughter, Margaret. And the council came up with what they thought was the best solution. Not to tell the young king, Henry VI of England, that he suddenly had so many half-siblings, perhaps, to spare his delicate mind. But the truth came out when Henry was about 16, around the same time his mother died shortly after childbirth. Just imagine the shock, and perhaps it was in that very state of shock that Henry ordered his stepfather to be imprisoned for violating the law concerning the remarriage of a queen. But when it came to his newly discovered siblings, he welcomed them with open arms, granting them titles and recognizing them as the king's half-brothers. And thanks to that act of generosity and the forbidden love of his mother, a dynasty was born that would go on to rule England for 118 years. Not immediately, of course. First, Edmund married Margaret Beaufort, who gave birth to a son, the very Henry who would later become Henry VII of England. But what happened to the founder of the dynasty himself? Owen? Soon, the same kind-hearted Henry, and he really does seem to have been a gentleman, released him from custody and even granted him a respectable income. Owen lived away from court, but when the Wars of the Roses began, he took the side of his stepson and ultimately died for him. He was captured and executed by the Yorkists. And according to legend, just before his execution, he joked, "The head that once lay in the lap of Queen Catherine must now lie on the executioner's block." And so, a single story of passion and a woman's search for happiness changed the course of English history. What do you think of Catherine of Valois? Personally, I truly admire this incredibly brave woman. But while passions were quietly unfolding behind the walls of Windsor Castle between Catherine and Owen, there was another woman who, perhaps inspired by the Queen's freedom in love, also dared to challenge the rules of society. I'm talking about Jacquetta of Luxembourg, the mother of Elizabeth Woodville. Jacquetta was not of royal blood like Catherine, but she came from the family of a very powerful French count with vast lands and influence. And by the way, her uncle, Jean II of Luxembourg, is known for having held Joan of Arc prisoner, and eventually selling her to the English for 10,000 livres. A rather questionable connection, of course. But I'm telling you this so you understand how a young woman like Jacquetta was able to marry the brother of the English king, Henry V, John of Lancaster, 1st Duke of Bedford. And if you look at his portraits, he was not exactly known for his beauty, unlike Jacquetta, who was said to be very beautiful and passed that beauty on to her descendants. But her marriage, just like Catherine's, whom she, by the way, served as a lady-in-waiting and likely observed very closely, was not destined to last. After only 2 years, her husband died, leaving Jacquetta a widow at just 19 years old. And not just a widow, but a very wealthy one. She held lands in both France and England, and her title of Duchess of Bedford placed her just below the Queen at court. But all of that came with one condition: she could not remarry without the king's permission. And as you can imagine, this was crucial to prevent such wealth from slipping out of royal control. But Jacquetta had plans of her own. She had long noticed a man who had accompanied her to England, Richard Woodville. Sir Richard Woodville was handsome and charming, but he had no significant aristocratic connections. If Owen Tudor at least had some respectable background, Richard had very little to his name, other than being the grandson of a sheriff of Northamptonshire. And, as you can imagine, that was hardly an impressive match. But on March 23rd, 1437, against all logic, status and financial interest, Jacquetta married Richard, simply for love. King Henry VI of England, who had only recently learned the truth about his own mother, was now faced with a very similar story from yet another member of his family. The king was so furious that he refused to see them and demanded a fine of £1,000, a very large sum at the time, although it likely did not trouble someone as wealthy as Jacquetta. But, just as in the case of his stepfather, the king soon changed his mind. He forgave the couple and even cancelled the fine. Henry VI clearly believed in love, even if he could not have known that this marriage would one day produce a woman who would marry his greatest rival. Their daughter, Elizabeth Woodville, who inherited her mother's legendary beauty, eventually married Edward IV of England and became his queen. And if you look closely, there's an interesting pattern here. The mother married beneath her status, choosing love over position. And the daughter, in a way, did the opposite, marrying a king who was far above her station. It's as if the story of the family turned in the opposite direction. After their daughter became queen, the Woodville family entered what could almost be called a golden age. The couple had 14 children and they used their positions wisely, arranging a number of successful marriage alliances. But this rapid rise in power did not go unnoticed. It angered Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, and the king's brother George, Duke of Clarence. In 1469, Warwick openly broke with Edward IV and temporarily overthrew him. Richard Woodville and their son John were captured and executed by Warwick on August 12th at Kenilworth. Jacquetta herself was later accused of witchcraft, accusations she defended herself against with remarkable strength. I actually have a video about this on my channel, so definitely check it out. After all these events, she withdrew from court life and died in her estate in 1472, surviving her husband by just 3 years. But even if their story ended in such a tragic way, I don't think their love ended there, and neither did their influence on history. Because it was through them that Queen Elizabeth of York was born, and her blood still runs in the veins of the British royal family to this day. So in a way, the love between Jacquetta and Richard continues to live on in every new generation. And now, we come to our third heroine. She was not of royal blood, but her life was closely intertwined with the crown. She was the king's mistress, possibly the mother of his children, and at the same time the sister of his wife. You've probably already guessed who I'm talking about, Mary Boleyn. We don't really know what Mary was like as a person. Was she as gentle and quiet as she is often portrayed in films, or more bold and independent, as some interpretations suggest? In fact, Mary is one of the least documented members of the Boleyn family. But up to a certain point, she likely followed the rules and did what was expected of her, which meant marrying the man chosen by her family. Her first marriage was to the courtier William Carey, and even Henry VIII himself attended their wedding. Since the exact timeline of her relationship with the king is unclear, there were many rumours that her children may have been his, especially her son, who, according to some accounts, bore a striking resemblance to the king. What her husband thought about all of this we can only guess, but he certainly benefited from the king's favour and advanced at court, that is, until his death. After that, Mary found herself in serious financial difficulty. At that point, her sister Anne Boleyn stepped in. By then, Anne was rising rapidly in Henry's favour. She secured a small annual income for Mary and even took responsibility for some aspects of her nephew's upbringing. Mary served as Anne's lady-in-waiting and was present at her coronation when Anne finally became Queen of England. But then, for a time, she disappeared from the court life, and when she returned, she came back as a married woman. In 1534, she secretly married William Stafford. He was a simple soldier of modest rank and fortune. Compared to him, even Owen Tudor and Richard Woodville looked like wealthy noblemen. In the Tudor series, Mary claims that she was seen as a disgrace, and that no one would have wanted to marry her. But that is simply not true. It's a fictional invention. She was the sister of the Queen of England. There would have been no shortage of suitors. And by choosing love, Mary effectively removed herself from the Boleyn family's political game. And that decision infuriated both her father and Anne. As a result, Mary was banished from court. She lost all financial support, and Anne, despite being queen, refused to provide for her. In a surviving letter that Mary wrote to Thomas Cromwell around that time, she described her situation with quiet dignity. She admitted that she had married for love, fully aware of the consequences. She expressed regret for angering her family, but not for the marriage itself. Mary asked Cromwell to speak to her father, uncle and brother, but nothing came of it. Anne relented only once, sending her a fine golden cup and some money, but still refused to restore her position at court. Mary's exile coincided with the most turbulent years of Anne's reign. When Anne Boleyn was arrested and executed in 1536, along with their brother George Boleyn, there are no records of Mary's reaction, or even whether she was allowed to be present. As I mentioned earlier, in many ways, she remains a closed book. Only toward the end of his life, after losing all his other children, did Thomas Boleyn begin to reconcile with his only surviving daughter. He even drafted a will to ensure Mary would have some financial stability, but she survived him by only 4 years. Mary died at the age of 44. No tomb, no monument, no inscription marking the place of her burial has survived. Mary Boleyn gave up everything for love, and perhaps in some way that choice became her salvation. Because had she remained tied to the ambitions of the Boleyn family, she might have shared the fate of her brother and sister. Instead, she stepped away from the struggle for power and chose a quiet life with the man she loved. And yet, interestingly, despite never seeking power, she remained closely connected to the crown. Through her daughter, Catherine Carey, and her descendants, she became an ancestor of the Queen Mother, and consequently of Elizabeth II. Her blood also runs through the Spencer family line. So, in a way, through her, the Boleyn legacy continues to live on. And, in a sense, continues to rule. In a world where politics and arranged marriages always came before feelings, there were still women who were brave enough to risk everything for love. They challenged the rules of their time and left us with truly powerful and unforgettable stories. Stories that continue to inspire even today. Which of them did you like the most? And if you know other stories like these, write them in the comments. Maybe we can create a second part of this video together. And of course, don't forget to show some love to the channel with a like. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.